So why doesn't the US just assassinate Vladimir Putin or the Ayatollah or Kim Jong-un for that matter? I mean, we could if we wanted to, as Trump alluded to with the Ayatollah recently surrounding these strikes on Iran. Well, outside of the strange relationship where Trump probably wouldn't do it anyways because of his affinity for Vladimir Putin, the primary reason is US policy flatly bans political assassination. After the CIA's Cold War plots against Fidel Castro, Patrice Lumumba, and others became public in the mid 1970s, President Gerald Ford issued Executive Order 11905, stating that, quote, no employee of the United States government shall engage in or conspire to engage in political assassination, end quote. Jimmy Carter strengthened that language in Executive Order 12036, and Ronald Reagan carried it forward in Executive Order 12333, and that one remains in force today. These orders are binding guidance for every single federal agency, including the military, and overturning them would require a separate presidential executive order to come out of Trump or any other future president. And this probably would cause a political firestorm. Second of all, international law treats the deliberate killing of a head of state inside his own country as an unlawful use of force, and absent a declared armed conflict and true self defense, is also considered an act of aggression. The modern law of war literature distinguishes, quote, targeted killings of combatants from the other side of it, which is assassinations. Now, the 2020 US strike on Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq shows how hard it can be to justify even a commander's killing in a neighboring nation, but there are ways to do it, especially since he wasn't in his own country and he wasn't technically a head of state. But translating that to doing that against a leader of a nuclear armed state such as Russia or North Korea would likely invite almost universal condemnation and violates the UN Charter. Now, the third reason is that the US has learned the political costs of covert killings the hard way. The Senate's 1975 Church Committee exposed CIA plots against Castro, Lumumba, and others, producing a public backlash that reshaped intelligence oversight. The resulting norms became part of Washington's soft power. By forswearing assassinations, U.S. leaders could criticize other leaders who are conducting their own extrajudicial killings without hypocrisy. Now, this included the attempted assassinations against Zelensky by Putin. Plus, the United States adhering to a policy such as we don't assassinate foreign leaders anymore encourages others to take the same stance with U.S. leaders. Now, fourth, killing Putin might not achieve U.S. goals and could actually make things worse. Russia has constitutional procedures that transfer presidential authority to the prime minister and then to early elections if the president dies, giving Moscow a legal path to rally around a successor. In a crisis, nationalist hardliners or the security services might prevail, and a decapitated command chain could create uncertainty about who controls Russia's nuclear forces, which is exactly the scenario that many deterrence theorists warn would happen. The immediate aftermath could see hair trigger alerts, reflexive missile posturing, or local commanders acting autonomously in what they think is the best interest of Russia. None of this serves the US or global security in any meaningful manner, and honestly makes it worse. Now, fifth, the geopolitical blowback would be pretty severe. Moscow would treat the act as an open declaration of war. NATO allies, lacking any prior consultation, might hesitate to join and just kind of leave whoever does the assassination, whether it's the United States or any other NATO nation, kind of out on their own, which would fracture the alliance. States that already view U.S. power skeptically would see confirmation of their worst fears. So Beijing, Tehran, and Pyongyang could cite this new precedent to justify their own future preemptive strikes and buildups. Assassination would also undercut decades of U.S. messaging that regime change should come from within, not by foreign dictate, even though that policy has been very, very loosely maintained. And even Trump has called for regime change in Iran, saying that potentially the use of these bombs against the nuclear sites was a part of a plan to try to get the Ayatollah out of power. Again, the main focus, though, would be for the Ayatollah to fall to his own people, not necessarily to assassination. And then finally, the effectiveness of this is doubtful. History shows us that eliminating one man rarely ends a conflict, and often it can create massive conflict, such as World War I. This transforms an adversary's system, makes them more hyper-aware and on a hair trigger. Saddam Hussein's Iraq absorbed dozens of decapitation strikes in 2003 before U.S. ground forces removed the regime. Al-Qaeda Qaeda and ISIS regenerated leaders after each high-value kill. Putin has spent 25 years coup-proofing his inner circle. Removing him could simply elevate another hardliner, which would have a mandate to strike back. This would also prolong the war in Ukraine, galvanize their people, and hand the Kremlin a martyr that they can put up on a pedestal for the entirety of Russia. So, as much as it would feel good for all of those reasons I stated, domestic law, international norms, nuclear risk, alliance politics, and the sheer strategic problems with conducting such assassinations, the US will not try to assassinate Vladimir Putin or the Ayatollah or Kim Jong un for that matter. Regime change fantasies may be emotionally satisfying, but in practice, they conflict with the very principles and interests the West seeks to defend. And honestly, anytime this comes up, smarter and cooler heads prevail that there is a better method for degrading a country's autocratic head of state.